Welcome into Tailgate Thursday for week number 13 of the 2024 college football season. My name is David Morrison from the Vol Society, here to preview the upcoming college football games featuring the Vols, the SEC, and games across the nation. And we begin with our beloved Tennessee Volunteers, ranked number 11 in this week's college football playoff rankings. Currently also the first team out of the college football playoff if the season ended today. But Tennessee, they did take the loss last week on the road at Georgia. Now they come back home. Final home game of the season, Senior Day, as they welcome in the UTEP Miners, who's 2-8 on the year. UTEP, not a good team at all. They won their last game against Kennesaw State in double overtime, and Kennesaw State at the time was like 1-7. So take it for what it's worth. This is basically a tune-up game before a pretty big matchup with Vanderbilt in Nashville next Saturday. But it is the Miners and the Volunteers, 1 o'clock Eastern time on the SEC network. Plus, and check your TV provider if you get the ESPN Plus and SEC Plus and all that fun stuff. I think it's also on the ESPN app if you have that too. So pass that information along the way. All right, let's go across the SEC. 12 o'clock on ABC, 9th-ranked Ole Miss heading to the Swamp to take on the Florida Gators. Florida pulled out a huge home win against LSU last week. Can they do it again as a top 10 Ole Miss team comes into Gainesville, Florida? Meanwhile for Ole Miss, they are still in the college football playoff discussion. They do have that loss to Kentucky, but they are also clinging on to a win against Georgia. So, Ole Miss just trying to win out and secure their spot for the CFP. But we shall see what happens Saturday at noon. I know for Tennessee fans, secretly rooting for Florida a little bit this week. All right, 3:30 ABC. We head to Austin, Texas. The 3rd-ranked Texas Longhorns welcoming in the Kentucky Wildcats. I'm very interested to see how Texas is going to approach this game because they have a huge showdown the next week on the road at College Station against Texas A&M. Does Texas look ahead to that game against A&M and maybe in a close game of Kentucky, or do they just handle business and move on? That's kind of the storyline to me going into this game is just, got a huge showdown for first place in the SEC next week between Texas and Texas A&M. So be very interesting to see what happens in this game between the Wildcats and the Longhorns. 4:15 SEC Network. Two teams not in the SEC running. The Missouri Tigers and the Mississippi State Bulldogs from Starkville. Missouri still hanging on to the top 25, 7-3 on the year. They take on Mississippi State, 4:15 SEC Network. Not much to talk about. This is what we call a Jefferson Pilot game right here. Kind of two average teams in the SEC, just kind of finishing their season out. Even though Missouri obviously has a better record, they'll make a pretty decent bowl game, but we'll see how that all shakes out in the end. But it is Mizzou and Mississippi State. 7:30 ABC. We have 3 SEC teams with 8-2 records on the road against teams at 500 or worse. We already talked about Ole Miss, Florida. Here's the second. We'll talk about the third one after this. But number 7, Alabama, 8-2 on the road at 5-5 Oklahoma, 7:30 p.m. ABC. Another game, I guess, if you're Tennessee, you're rooting for Oklahoma to win. To give Tennessee a better odds to get in the playoffs. Tennessee does have head-to-head wins against both of these teams, but Tennessee is not playing in this game. But just like I said, Alabama trying to win out, get to the playoffs. Meanwhile, for Oklahoma, trying to pick up that 6th win so they can at least be bowl eligible for Oklahoma's first season in the SEC. They got this game this week, and next week they take on LSU, and I believe that game's in Baton Rouge. So be an interesting matchup. These are two proud programs with a lot of tradition and history, and now conference foes, Alabama and Oklahoma. All right, the final 8-2 team on the road in the SEC, the Texas A&M Aggies. Currently first place in the SEC, even though they're ranked number 15th in the CFB, but they head to Jordan-Hare Stadium to take on the Auburn Tigers, 4-6 on the year, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff on ESPN. Yeah, it'll be Eastern Time where I'm at. A lot of people is kind of pulling the upset as Auburn to get the win over A&M. In a way, I can see it. It wouldn't shock me, but, this is an Auburn team that had many opportunities to pull big wins and have a great season, just never could do that. Looking back to the Oklahoma game and the Missouri game, can they give a nice signature win for Hugh Freeze in his second season? For Texas A&M, are they looking ahead to Texas? I don't know. Maybe, I guess if you're A&M, you're probably not really looking ahead since you're on the road. But that is up for discussion, and obviously a big time showdown between the two Lone Star states or Lone Star teams in the SEC with Texas and Texas A&M. But be very interesting to see how some of these games pan out. And then finally in the SEC, a couple 6-4 teams meeting each other. Team Tennessee face next week 6-4 Vanderbilt on the road to Baton Rouge to take on the 6-4 LSU Tigers. 7:45 kickoff on the SEC Network. What's LSU going to kind of do here in the next couple of weeks? They're definitely out of the playoff discussion. I think they were out even after that second loss, but for the most part, LSU trying to at least finish 8-4 on the year. They got the game with Oklahoma next week, and kind of the rumblings is going to go on with Brian Kelly in the offseason. I don't see Brian Kelly losing his job this year, but definitely going to be very interesting to see how he'll do in 2025. Meanwhile, for Vanderbilt, they're just happy to be 6-4 at this point. What kind of Vanderbilt team are we going to see? Is this Vanderbilt team going to not be intimidated by Saturday night in Death Valley and pull out a huge win and get ready for a big-time showdown with Tennessee? Or, how much, I guess you could say how much is left in the tank for Vanderbilt for the next couple of weeks. We shall see. All right, let's go across the nation here. Big game in the Big Ten. Big noon Saturday also on Fox, and I know Ohio State fans are loving that. But it is a huge game, especially for Tennessee fans as far as keeping an eye out on it while we're watching UTEP. Actually, this game will be better than the UTEP game. Number 5, Indiana, 10-0 on the year. At number 2, Ohio State, 9-1 from the Horseshoe in Columbus. Indiana's undefeated and having a great season, but the talking point for the Hoosiers is they really haven't played anybody. And what was supposed to be their toughest opponent, the Michigan Wolverines, is right now 5-5, but now here we go. You get Ohio State. Obviously, if Indiana wins, they're in. But if Ohio State wins or blows out Indiana, then where does a potential 11-1 Indiana team fit into the playoff discussion? A lot of people says it could be out. Ohio State pretty much is in. Kind of, I guess you could say win, lose, or draw at this point, unless they get blown out by Michigan the next week. But definitely a game that's going to be very interesting to see, and just how the committee is going to look at this game or pretend to look at this game. All right, another game in the Big Ten. Penn State, 9-1 on the year, number 4 in the CFP. Going to Minneapolis to take on the Minnesota Golden Gophers, 6-4 on the year. 3:30 game, or 3:30 kickoff on CBS, as I try to say that correctly. Penn State, kind of being left out of this Big Ten discussion. Obviously, they have the loss of Ohio State, but everybody's talking about the Buckeyes and Indiana and Oregon. But Penn State kind of being left out at this point. They could still end up getting to the Big Ten championship game or need some help. But they're quietly at 9-1. But it's going to be a pretty tough environment as they go to Minnesota. And I know it's kind of weird saying that, but one thing about Big Ten games, if you do get a Michigan, a Penn State, Ohio State, and now I guess with the recent additions of an Oregon, these other stadiums are going to fill up. They're going to make a lot of noise and try to cause some havoc. So we'll see what happens there. 3:30 on ESPN, beg your pardon. 14th ranked BYU heading to Tempe to take on the 21st ranked Arizona State Sun Devils. 8-2 on the season, 3:30 ESPN, as I mentioned. Big-time matchup in the Big 12. You know, BYU right now, the last team in the CFP at this point. They are in first place in the Big 12. But this is going to be a tough environment. Kenny Dillingham has done a fantastic job turning this Arizona State program around, ranked in the top 25. A lot of people wasn't expecting them to have 8 wins this season. But, you know, they're hanging in there and could cause some interesting scenarios in the Big 12 championship game. And the other team that's kind of making a lot of noise in the Big 12 is the Colorado Buffaloes. Coach Prime,'s Buffs, 8-2 on the year. They head to Arrowhead Stadium to take on the Kansas Jayhawks, who upset BYU last week, picked up their 4th win. Colorado's only a 2-point favorite in this contest. We'll see what happens in this one as the Big 12 is, got a lot of drama, if you will, in the standings. With BYU and Colorado and Arizona State, and just going to be a fun finish to that conference. And this game right here, Colorado and Kansas, 3:30 on Fox. And finally, another game with major college football playoff implications. Kind of turning the clock back with this one about 110 years ago. But the undefeated Army Black Knights, 9-0 on the year, taking on the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame, ranked number 6. This is a 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time kickoff on NBC from a legendary Yankee Stadium. I mean, these two teams, no strangers to each other, especially in the turn of the 20th century in college football. These two were powerhouses back then and met, either at Yankee Stadium or probably the old Polo Grounds back then. So, fast forward 100 and 110 years later, to be exact, these two teams in a major college football playoff game, and Army has not defeated Notre Dame since 1958. And like I said, obviously these two teams don't meet each other every year, but just kind of give you the impact of that. So we'll see what happens. Once again, Tennessee fans definitely going to be rooting for Army because Notre Dame's kind of being the thorn to the side for not only Tennessee, but a lot of teams in the college football playoffs due to not being affiliated with a conference. But should be a fun little matchup. I guess a nostalgia feel to it, but it's 2024 to be exact, and we'll see what happens between Army and Notre Dame. All right, that's going to wrap it up for Tailgate Thursday. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and enjoy the football.